Hello and welcome. British star Timothy Dalton 3 times turned down the role of James Bond before he eventually signed on for The Living Daylights. The first time he was tested for on Her Majesty's Secret Service, but he felt he was too young, and on the other occasions his stage, TV and film workloads were so busy he simply couldn't fit it in. A classically trained actor, Tim had built a substantial career on the British stage and television, co-starring with the likes of Peter O'Toole, Anthony Hopkins, Mae West, Marcello Mastroianni, Virna, Lisi and Malcolm McDowell. When a full workload again prevented him from taking the Bond role, it was offered to Pierce Brosnan, but ironically, Pierce's commitments to TV's Remington Steele prevented him from accepting the role. Tim somehow found time to reorganise his workloads and work demands and accepted the role. When The Living Daylights opened in Sydney, Timothy was rounded on by some of the media who felt the Bond lifestyle of womanising, smoking, drinking and gambling was outdated, and he suddenly found himself justifying and defending the fictional hero, loved and admired by millions of fans around the world. I asked him how he felt about the abrupt criticism and was it valid?
Well, I mean, if you're going to do James Bond, I mean, the only point of view I can take, I mean, if as I've more or less said, you know, if you want to write an original story and call the guy whatever you want to call him, that's it. It's like Albert Pure. You know, you can have him drinking vegetable juice and not hurting a fly and being celibate or whatever you like, but if you're going to do James Bond, I mean, James Bond does, in a literary sense, exist.
Yeah.
You know, he exists in a cinematic sense and in a literary sense.
But I think the point of the question was they felt, well, here is this man about town, a man about the world kind of thing. Perhaps, you know, an advertising agency should sort of utilise the Bond character and therefore Timothy Dalton personifying to say,
well, that's what somebody
men
said.
out there.
No, but that I think it would be a terrible distortion. If you're going to do Bond, do Bond. I mean, the fact that he drinks, the fact that he smokes, the fact that he drives fast cars, the fact that, gambles, seem to me all very understandable symptoms, if you like, of somebody living
Oh, sure.
a life that's very tense and dangerous, and where their life, they might not live a second more. It's part of the character. I mean, I would love to see that perhaps exploited more in the movie. Now, people shouldn't. I mean, I can say as myself straight off, sure, smoking is bad for you. I happen to smoke. There's been long periods in my life when I've not. I've made no bones about it. I wouldn't advise anybody to smoke. If I was a non-smoker, I'd probably get somebody to make up some special cigarettes with nicotine in them. Because somehow my approach to a role must be to try and do what the author intended, and we've got very clearly defined before us what an author intended. Fleming gave...
You don't see there's any community responsibility that could be utilised here?
Maybe for me, as myself, as an actor, to stand up and say this, this and this, yes, but not as a character, no.
Fine, okay. Well, I just wanted to let you sort of clarify, because I've just felt that...
Well, as I said, I mean, all right, smoking's bad, but so's drinking, so's killing. We live in a very violent world.
You don't feel you have any responsibility or the image
if you're going to play
to help
James,
the community.
if you're going to play James Bond, you've got to play James Bond. I mean, you don't have to, but if you're going to be serious about your work, even though it's an escapist piece of popular entertainment, well, let's be serious about it. Let's do it.
Oh, no, I agree. And in speaking of being serious about it, one of the things I obviously have seen the film, saw it last week, and enjoyed it greatly. And like you, I think I was always a fan of Bond from, I can remember reading the books when I was 12 or something, like the first ones. And one of the things that struck me, I suppose, as I was sort of got older and learned to analyse things, not consciously sit down and analyse it, but you just think back, is that the early Bonds always had those massive bad guys, the Blofelds and the Dr. No's and so on. And yet this one doesn't really have a formidable baddie. Do you feel that's a kind of a shortcoming in it?
Well, I'd certainly say that traditionally or classically in Fleming's novels, there was a single and very singular personification of evil, whether it was a Blofeld or a Drax or a Goldfinger or whoever. And I mean, I think that is classic Fleming. If you want to sort of drag out the sort of mythical element in the Bonds, because of course they're not spy stories. Maybe the only spy story, two spy stories might have been Casino Royale and From Russia with Love. The rest are not spy stories. To drag out the mythical element, you've got to have a dragon. You've got your damsel, and you've got to have your dragon. And these characters were the dragon. And in that sense, we don't in this film. But it's a very changed film. The past 14 years have been, I don't know if I said this at the press conference, forgive me for being boring, but, as I think I said, Connery himself found himself uncomfortable in the last film or the last two films that he did because gimmickry, gadgetry, extravaganza were taking over. Moore found the way to deal with that and made them light-hearted, flippant, tongue-in-cheek, and two-dimensional, cartoon-like. And ours is a changed style of film. And sometimes, change is difficult. People are resistant to change. Sometimes you just have to make change very clear.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said before, I don't think the evil is less. What is very different about our film is it's no longer two-dimensional. Mm-hmm. Of course, it's an escapist fantasy. But it is rooted in real people and real believable things, particularly reading about Orangate and all that, and drugs and arms. And I think making the villains, the villains are no less evil. They are more complex and real.
No,
I think it's not necessarily a bad thing. It does root the film in its entirety much more, although not for a minute it's not entertaining, it's not escapist, in a realistic route. So maybe in another film, there will be a major film, but I don't think this is bad for this film.
What about the physical side of it?
I think our problem with Task was to get it away from the cartoon style, back to something more real, but still wonderfully, adventurous and entertaining, fantastic.
Oh no, I was.
But I do agree.
The early films.
I love Goldfinger. I think Goldfinger is terrific. It's not bad to have one major villain, but this is transitional, and there's got to be change, and change is difficult.
What was the hardest part as an actor, physicalizing the role for you?
Quite simply, it's a hugely long schedule. It's the longest schedule I've ever worked on.
How long was it?
19 weeks for me. The longest I'd ever done before was 15. Most films are then, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 at the most. 19 weeks, I was supposed to have 4 days off, and I didn't have a one off. Literally the hardest thing was not a physical thing. It's just that every single minute of the day, the working day and the non-working day, because you're still working and thinking when you're at home. There are decisions to be made. Crucial decisions. Even if it's something simple, like walking across a room and saying, "How do you do?" or giving somebody a cup of tea. It's got to be right. Decisions about how to bring the script to life, how to actually really present it. And most of the time, most people don't find themselves making crucial decisions that often. Well, even though the decision of the moment might be a tiny decision, if you get it wrong, you made a tiny failure. If you make another decision wrong or don't get it right, that's another tiny failure, which might not mean too much. They add up. And if you have too many tiny failures, you've made a big failure. So the sheer, constant, incessant pressure of knowing you've got to go up there, within minutes. You're not going to get many chances, maybe one or two. You've got to get it right. Really, that's the difficulty. It's as simple as that. I mean, not the physicality, because I mean, it's all pretend anyway, you know.
I know. I'm sort of finding.
I mean, I found, say, doing the play or the plays you saw last year. I mean, after the first scene of Taming of the Shrew, I came off of it. I had maybe 3 or 4 layers of clothing on. The outer layer was sodden with sweat, and I was exhausted. Take your breath, you know, get your breath, and you go on and you give that up, the next scene. That's much more time. Filming is mentally tiring.
I didn't mean anything about being exhausting. I mean actually just
difficult.
Creating in yourself for the camera. The Bond persona.
I think. Well, you are governed by the script. You know, you can't corrupt the script by doing something other than what it requires. I mean, the scene requires something. It really is just how to flesh out the storyline, how to make dialogue which is pretty well at the service of the storyline, you know, more interesting or alive, real. You've got to find your honesty, you've got to find your truth. You've got to do what you do in a way that seems absolutely right and interesting. But Fleming, you know, Bond is there in Fleming, provided you.
Did you go back and read all the books that you hadn't read?
Absolutely. I'm finding it a little difficult to talk at the moment because I feel I might be repeating what I said at the press conference. But you know, he obviously did do something right.
Sure.
Very right. You know, and it would be supreme foolishness to ignore Fleming's intention, because he did give birth not only to a successful series of books, but to these movies. Whether the movies have, you know, developed his stories, changed his stories, you know, they still rely on that series of books and on his writing. So he got something right. Yes. Yeah. So that's the first place I went. Read them all.
Again, I mean, had you read them all?
I'd read Dr. No when Dr. No, the film came out, but I've not read them all. And I actually thought, going back to them, it'd probably be a bit trivial. And I was very surprised. I was delightfully surprised because, you know, I couldn't put them down. I got caught up in them. I wanted to, you know, the chapter comes to an end and you think, that's it. Oh, damn way. You know, he's still reading on.
Yeah. But he's regarded as technically a very good writer, apart from his, you know, what he created in the fictional side of things. Just dwelling on the physical side of it, were there any scenes in there that were physically difficult that you got yourself involved in at all?
Maybe none that seemed so. I mean, I got involved in all the action sequences. I thought it was important. You know, for a start, there's wanting to get better shots. In a way, it's a shame that I'm not, as it were, thoroughly introduced till after that Land Rover chase down and fight down the Rock of Gibraltar, because of course you can see, I can see, it's me on that damn Land Rover. But of course the audience don't really know it's me because I've not been properly presented.
Yes.
But you see, even that's not difficult because you don't do it all in one go.
But you actually did get on the top.
Oh yeah, I mean, I would say 90% of that's me.
So were there any that you said that you didn't seem to be difficult? Were there any that in fact turned out to be a little more difficult than you anticipated?
No. Because it is pretend. I mean, no one's going to do anything that's dangerous. No one's going to do anything where anybody gets hurt. Can you imagine someone being killed or breaking a leg?
Well,
you know, it's pretend. This is our skill. You know, what we do is we create on the screen the impression of extraordinary danger.
That's right.
But that's our skill. That's why people get prizes. And the audience know this. I mean, they're fully aware of, you know, behind the scenes at movie making, films and bits and pieces.
But equally, some people do get in there and have a go at something that they really should have left to a stuntman for egotistical reasons, or being, you know, not a director, or they really believe they can do it. You showed more common sense, did you?
Well, if you actually think what I do, I mean, what do I do in the film? I mean, what do I do? There's the Land Rover at the beginning. There's a bit of a run around on the rooftops in Tangier. And there's the cargo net fight outside the back of the Hercules. There's only real 3.
Right.
Oh well. There's the ski. You know, the snow.
Ski, yeah. Well, you did. That was.
Oh sure. I mean,
I met
but
Mariam.
then the point is, I mean, don't talk about me. What about Mariam? I mean, she was there. You know, that was undoubtedly us going down.
Yeah. Well, I met her at Canada, and she said that was the most hair-raising thing she'd ever done before.
But, you know, I mean, think of how many people go skiing. You know, if you take a tumble, it's only the same as falling off your skis, isn't it? I mean,
Are you scared?
No, I'm not. No. It was good fun going down on that sled. It really was. One shouldn't give the stunts away, really.
Oh, no.
The audience do want to believe. They do want to suspend us.
I know, I don't want to do that, but I know that talking to, you know, I spend my life talking to actors, and, you know, it's amazing. There have been people who've been warned by the director and the stunt director, look, it's okay, we'll have a guy do it. No, I can cope with it,
Well, then they shouldn't have let him. But of course, I mean, it's worth pointing out, everyone sees the credits at the end of the movie. The stunt guys are skilled professionals, you know, they know what they do. Might be 1 or 2 cowboys around, but not enough. I mean, these are top guys. And, hell, you know, for Christ's sake, I don't want to break my leg or my neck. You know, I'd much prefer to finish the movie than be in hospital.
Sure.
But most of the things you see can be organised in such a way that nothing is dangerous. It's only when it's all put together that it looks so.
You know, with the mats.
Yeah. But we didn't use any mats. I don't think we ever had a mat in the movie.
No?
Never. I think I can swear that one to you. There was never a mat in the movie. Never.
I'm tempted to ask about the sequence in the air then at the end of the film.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, but I won't tell you on I'll tell you afterwards. Never a mat in the movie. But on the Land Rover, that was me. But that doesn't take a great deal of. I mean, you're not running out of breath. You just on top of it, yeah, you know.
How would you like people to perceive James Bond as you created him on the screen?
Well, I think what's more important, I'd love them to love the film.
To love the film, they've got to love the James Bond.
Well, yes, they do. But don't forget, you've had James Bond films where you might love the James Bond, but if you don't like the film, people don't go to see it. You know, but there's obviously the films, some have been better than others, and some have done better than others. So I think that point is proven. And also, however much you like any other major actor, often they'll do a film that's a perfectly good film, a film that's worth doing, that they're damn good in. But because it's not the persona that people have seen them in before, they might not like it. You don't go to a movie to see a performance; you go to see a story, a film. So ultimately, I'd like people to like The Living Daylights, and I do think it's a cracking good piece of entertainment.
All right, but after that,
how would I perceive me? Well,
what sort of a Bond did you?
You see, in a funny way. Well, that's it. You don't start out deciding, having read the books and been excited by the fact that Fleming created a man who did seem deeply human, and full of contradictions, odd contradictions, deeply human. And, he was always talking about how frightened Bond was in a dangerous moment, how his insides were clenching, sweat. How identifiable a man Bond was. I mean, whoever read any of those books, whoever became Bond whilst he was reading them. I mean, Fleming found that way in. And he found it in, I'm sure, by leaving certain holes empty, but filling the periphery with emotions and thoughts that we, all of us, would understand. In other words, he made them very human.
Yeah.
And that excited me because I realized that, first of all, heroes are real. They're not Superman or Rambos or whatever. They're real people. I mean, the world is full of heroes. People who are,
You mean real heroes?
Real heroes. A burning house or a wartime or
an
ocean or whatever.
Yeah.
But also I thought, well, if the audience actually can find a link with it, can be involved in it, or identify with it, then the fantasy, they'll believe the fantasy. The more you anchor it in reality, the further you can stretch fantasy. You know, I mean, I think we laugh and enjoy that snow escapade and the aeroplane escapade much more because we're kind of involved in the movie, because we're involved in him.
Yeah.
Whereas before, we'd kind of watch objectively, but not be involved. So I really wanted people to I wanted to make a film that adults, grown-ups, me, my friends, would enjoy, that the kids would enjoy as well. I don't go for this modern philosophy of, you know, people say, well, it's kids that go to the movies, we must make movies for kids.
Mm-hmm.
When we went to the movies, we went to see grown-up movies. And we loved them, and, you know, they were better movies. I'd love this to be a piece of adult escapist adventure entertainment that the kids would love.
So what do your friends think of it?
I think they like it. I mean, I think what I'm pleased about is, never mind my friends. I mean, what is astonishing is when I was offered it, you know, I was the one that had 3 weeks of doubts before accepting it. And all my friends said, do it. You know, they were the ones that were terribly excited. But so when I talk about the film now having been out, I say, never mind my friends. I mean, my friends and people our age, people who used to go to see Bond films, you know, that whole group of people who aren't the ones that any longer go to see them, all say it's terrific.
Mm. You had 3 weeks of doubt, did you?
Yeah.
Even though you'd been able to consider it when you were 24 or 25 and won some... Why? Why then did you have doubt?
However much you'd like to think, and however right in theory it is, that this is a movie in its own right. You know, it's going to be on in a cinema house, and people are going to go in and pay their money and go and watch it. 2 hours later, they're going to come out. You can't divorce it from its history, and you can't divorce it from, you know, the predecessors, the actors who played the part before. And although comparisons, when I think comparisons are pretty senseless, frankly, they're unavoidable.
But you were making them in your own mind.
Well, I mean, I know that an audience will. I mean, I've got a responsibility to the history. I've got a responsibility to the future, as well as the present. I've got the problems of overcoming a deep audience involvement with, you know, the other actors. I mean, there are people like Sean Connery, there are people like Roger Moore. Those that prefer those films don't like the Roger Moore films. Those that like the Roger Moore films don't like the Sean Connery films. I've got to kind of make a new mark. And if I fail, it's going to be a world-famous failure. And I'm going to be the person responsible for putting the bleeding nail in the coffin. And my life is going to be fucking hell for 2 or 3 years if it doesn't work.
So what convinced you? Was it somebody saying something to you, or a conclusion that you finally reached, or was there a moment where something fell into place?
I'd like to just sort of pick up on that one thing that I said. I mean, I say I don't think comparisons are much use, because how the hell can you compare From Russia with Love to Moonraker? I mean, I might have said that at the press conference, but From Russia with Love, serious. And there's hardly a laugh in the movie. But remember that train sequence with Robert Shaw, a terrific piece of drama, real psychodrama. I mean, they were serious, exciting films that Connery was wonderful in. And then when they got into this technological fantasy extravagant thing, I mean, Roger Moore was right for them. Connery wouldn't or couldn't, or at least he said. You know, I mean, they were different. So you can't compare those films. You can't really compare this, but you know it's going to happen. There's going to be a lot of people who will regret the move away from something cartoon-like and fun. I mean, I think our film's funnier than any of the films, because it's humour that's based out of situation in good, you know. I think
in the narrative.
Well, yeah. I mean, you used to talk about situation comedies, you know. I mean, God knows this is situation fantasy in a sense. So who doesn't laugh when they get on that sled and go careering down the mountainside, or the audacity of having a fight hanging out of the back of a plane at 15,000 feet? You know, and there's wonderful moments of humor. I think the M's and the Q's, not only brilliantly paid, but I mean, in today's world, when we have Peter Wright and Ronald Reagan and the Iran Gate, you know, it was wonderful, perhaps accidental, but wonderful insight. You know, the corridors of power are staffed by, you know, lunatic old men who can't remember what happened yesterday. You know. Anyway, sorry, I've gone way off the point.
Yeah, well, was there a point? You said you had that 3 weeks of doubt. What was it?
That maybe one change.
Yeah. What?
Well,
no. That convinced you to do it. I mean, did somebody finally say something?
Well,
that
I mean,
fell into place?
I've only said half. No, nobody said anything except Mr. Broccoli. I mean, I've sort of half illustrated the downside. The good side, the upside, is that if I'd have got this script and it was called something else, I'd have done it, as it had all the potential to be what, in fact, it's turned out to be. It's the first. I mean, believe it or not, after 20 years in the business, it's the first modern, contemporary part I think I've ever been offered in a movie. Action part. Also, I mean, the cinema is important to an actor's life. The cinema reaches millions of people. And it's the only major international film that offers a part for a British actor.
So what was it? I've got a pin on this.
What did Timothy Broccoli say?
Was it after the 3 weeks of doubt?
Well, no. I mean, really, in a sense, it wasn't exactly after that. It was at some point of discussions during it. What this script represented, obviously, was a change to a kind of film that my heart would like, because my heart lies with the early films and the Fleming books. So that was a clear focus away from what had been before. And he said to me, in fact, I think he said his favourite film was From Russia with Love. So there we have an immediate indication of, what the possibilities might be for the future. But he said, because I want to know what kind of film was going to be made, that his care was with the early film. And that's what he wanted out of this one. And he said, that's obviously what you can. You bring your interpretation, and we'll back you. Which means that, it's a brave thing to say. It's the right thing to say, because nobody's going to be at their best unless they're doing what they believe in. And you couldn't say to an actor playing Hamlet, now I'm going to tell you how to play it. You actually choose the actor whose Hamlet you want. Yeah. Not that Hamlet is Bond by any means.
No, but I take it for it.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I mean, when he said that, and coupled with, all the knowledge is, the best people are working on it. It's going to be made superbly. And, you climb a mountain, there's always a chance of falling off. But if you believe you can climb it, then you climb it. The door was opened then. So you say, right, there's an upside and a downside to everything. By God, we can make this film to its full potential. And I'm going to have a go at doing that, or playing my part in accomplishing it. That was really it.
Can I just very quickly on the Brenda Starr? What's happened to that?
It's been bought by New World. There's been, I suppose, various scurrilous mentions in some of the press talking about the ill-fated or so on. So that's nonsense. It's actually a very nice film. Difficult to put into a niche. I've seen, I suppose, it'll be a fine cut without music. It's delightful, it's charming, it's fun. It's been the best she's ever been. It's been bought by New World. It's only not been, but it was made virtually at the same time as The Living Daylights, immediately. It's going to be released in January.
And you're happy with it? Because you're the Black Orchid, right?
Yeah. I've not seen it, I've not seen it with animation. There's quite a lot of animations in it, I believe. I've not seen it with music. But it's strange, isn't it? It's a strange film. I mean, you can't put it you can't classify it.
I mean, does it
but
fall
it's enjoyable.
Kind of romancing a stone?
Oh no, not at all.
Tongue-in-cheek adventure thing?
No, not at all. It's a kind of, it's a
humorous?
Oh, humorous, definitely. It really is like a cartoon, but it's real.
And they've made it work.
I think so. I mean,
because she was another. I mean, James Bond was one sort of thing that I was into, and Brenda Starr.
Really?
I was curious though, because Jill St. John was going to play the role at one stage.
Oh, she would have been. I love Jill St. John in the Bond movie she played. I think she was one of the best ever Bond ladies. Was it Diamonds Forever?
I think so.
Yeah. It's difficult for me to talk about Brenda Starr. It's very enjoyable. But it doesn't. You can't call it an adventure. You can't call it a romance. It's.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Right. Listen, how long before you start the next Bond film?
Well, if there is one, I I think it's looking good for one.
Oh, I'm sure.
It's looking good for one. I mean, we've had tremendous early success. I mean, tremendous, phenomenal early success.
Right.
We just opened in America, and it's the weekend figures were the best for any Bond film ever, and it's at the moment, I think, leading all the films in America. I mean, by that I don't mean it's leading something like Beverly Hills Cop, because that's been on
but in the opening box office.
In the opening box office.
Yes. So
And of course, it took the all-time record in London for the opening. But that's only the beginning. You know, it's got to maintain that for a long time. It's got to be a blockbuster to break even.
Well, Jerry was just saying it's got to do about 80 to 90 rentals in America.
Well, the figure I heard was more. I heard up to about 100. Oh, in America, I don't know, but worldwide, I think it's got to do about 120.
But the time frame usually would have you back shooting sort of somewhere in the latter part of next year.
Yeah, or the following year. Or the spring of the following year. That would be about...
Which is the next one they've got to do? It's one of the short stories.
Well, no one's made a decision to do one yet. I mean...
I'm sure Cubby has, but...
Well, he's always said, you know, if the present one makes $1, and it seems to me that the way they're thinking is waiting till November, December, until it has opened worldwide, until there's a good projection of what's going to be the financial situation, and then they'll start. There's a few short stories left, a few titles left. I don't think it really matters. I mean, the films are original scripts based upon titles.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, they could write an original script and call it what they want, really.
Timothy went on to have a very successful career, not only in film but in TV series and on stages around the world. He made one more Bond film, Licensed to Kill, in 1989. The movie suffered from a lack of marketing, which didn't help its box office performance, but critics worldwide felt his interpretation of Bond, second time around, worthy of critical acclaim, and many felt it was the closest to the original character that author Ian Fleming had created in his many books. These days, Timothy can be seen in TV's The Crown and the series 1923. For the record, he'll turn 77 in March 2023.